Hi, and welcome to 10 Minutes with TmFal. Today's episode is Talk to Her. Letters to your future self. Letter to that you plus 20 self. So in my case, that would be a love letter to my 70-year-old self. If you're in your 20s, it could be to your 40-year-old self. Just a letter to your future self. And that's important because when we visualize and talk to that girl, that woman, that older woman, and we see her and love her, kind to her, then we do things in our current self to put things in place for what we want for her. So a lot of times we think about 70 as really, really old. But for those of us who are like 50 now, we always say, oh my gosh, I remember my 30s and that happened so fast. And one of my friends told me a couple of months ago and said, if we think the last 20 and 30 years went by so quickly, we still remember our college days and our high school days so quickly, well, the next 20 are not going to go any slower. So that 70-year-old woman is going to happen before we know it. And this is an episode about just thinking about her lovingly, kindly, not as an old woman, but as just yourself in 20 years. And then visualizing what you want for her. So be kind to yourself in the present. Live your best life, your authentic life. Be present. Be kind to the woman that you are now, or the person that you are now. And then think of yourself in 20 years and think of that woman. So for me, thinking about that 70-year-old woman, I visualize her. Where do I want her to be? Where's she living? What's she doing? Who's around her? Is she traveling? Is she volunteering? Is she working still? Is she working part-time? Is she doing nothing at all? Is she around grandchildren? If she's been blessed, does she have a partner? What is happening to her? What do you want? What do I want for her? So this is a time to look in the mirror and visualize that, in my case, 70-year-old woman. In your case, yourself plus 20 years. Be kind to yourself now and be kind to that person. And when you think about that person, not just as someone older down the line, but as just yourself, 20 years from now, you're kinder to your person now, and you put things in place for that future self. So now that you've taken time to look into the future, if we're blessed with life, to be alive 20 years from now, and you visualized where you want her to be, what she's doing, who surrounds her, then let's talk about some of the things you start to think about putting in place for her. So we talk about health. Health is always one of the things we think about as we get older. Is our health failing? Are we in good health? We pray for good health. You find yourself as you hit your 40s and early 50s, when you're wishing your friends happy birthday, you talk about wishing you a great year, great health, good health. We start to really understand the importance of health. And I like to think about health not just as the absence of disease. So yes, we want a healthy, older adulthood, but not just the absence of disease, but a state of complete physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual health. And in this case, also financial health. So we can add that on there. So if you think about your future, in my case, 70-year-old, and you think about where you want her to be physically. So is she physically active, able to travel, able to participate in sports and exercise and yoga, on all the things, you want to do? Do you want to travel? Do you want to be that 70-year-old who walks on the plane, walks out? Or do you see yourself being wheeled out in a wheelchair? So you start to think about physical. And when you think about your future self, Then you look at what you need to do now to preserve your health. Now, obviously, illnesses happen and they're things we can't prevent, and we have no control over certain things, but you can control certain things about putting exercise in place, looking at strength training and things that improve your bone health, making sure that you're keeping up with your physical exams, eating right the best you can, doing things with your screening for your medical conditions. So this is not a time to be in denial about screening for breast cancer and viral hepatitis and colon cancer screening and all the age-appropriate things, because you're doing that for your future self. You want to preserve her and you want to keep her as healthy as you can. So screening for certain conditions when they're age-appropriate is important, because you can actually, if things are diagnosed earlier, better outcomes, able to preserve your future self. So that's physical, eating well, taking care of yourself. Your mental health remains important. So thinking about those things that maybe stress you out, things that affect your mood and affect your overall view of yourself. Start to put things in place to figure out how you can minimize stress or cope with stressful situations, removing yourselves from triggers and people who are toxic or negative in your life, putting processes in place for meditation, and promoting your mental health. And saying if you need therapy, if you need to see a psychologist, putting things in place to address issues now so that you're in a better place 20 years from now and able to cope with issues as they come up, developing resilience strategies and coping skills, all in a way of preserving and enhancing your mental health into the future. And also looking at things that improve your memory and help you stay engaged. Then you start thinking about your social health. What do you have in place now? Who do you want to be around you? What relationships have you cultivated with your friends, with your family, with your children, if you've been blessed with them, with your siblings, with close friends? What are your social networks? Do you volunteer? Do you have other people in your network? What is your social circle like? Relationships that matter to you, do you nurture them now? Do you let the people that you value know that? Do you appreciate your social support and your social circle? Do you give back? These are things and networks that you're putting in place for that future self, if you want that. You're looking at your spiritual health. How are you growing in your spiritual journey? How are you connecting? What are you doing to enhance and strengthen your spiritual life? If you pray, are you praying more? Are you reading? Are you meditating? Spiritual health, if it's important to you, is going to be even more important as you get older. And what are you doing now to enhance that and continue to grow that aspect of your life? Your emotional health, how do you cope with things? What are the overriding emotions all the time, and what are the things you think about when you think about your older self? So if you think about your health, not just as absence of disease, but you think about your physical, mental, social, spiritual, emotional health, then you start to put things in place now as you think about that self plus 20-year-old. And then financial health is really important. So while you're thinking about where you want her to be, what is she doing? Is she living comfortably? Is she struggling in retirement? Is she able to travel if that's what she wants? Those are things that you're thinking about now and putting in place. So then you become very conscious about what is your retirement plan. The importance of compound interest, you can't overemphasize. What are you putting aside? Are you looking at elder care? Are you putting money aside to have additional supportive services if you need that? What are you doing around health and health insurance and putting in disability insurance if you're not able to work for as long as you want? What are you doing with your credit? What are you doing in terms of putting things aside for emergencies? So if you visualize your 70-year-old self being able to have retired comfortably, traveling if she wants to, volunteering on her own terms, then you start to do things now to put that in place. But you can only do that and not leave it to random chance when you love that future person, when she's not an old woman, but just an older version of you, and you talk to her lovingly. And a lot of times, if you're part of a partnership, you want to have this discussion also with your partner about what you think about when you're 70. What are you doing? Are we traveling? Are we downsizing? Having those discussions. But this aspect of my podcast is really about what you want to do or how you see yourself 20 years from where your current is. If you're a 20-year-old just in college or finishing up in college, think about what you want of your 40-year-old self and apply those same principles, looking at what you want physically, mentally, socially, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. And so this podcast on talking to her, a love letter to your future self. Think of yourself 20 years from now. Be kind to your present self, but even kinder to that future girl, a future woman. Think about her lovingly and think about what you want for her, where she will be, what she's doing, who she's around, and then start to put things in place for her. Thank you for listening to 10 Minutes with TmFal. It's been a pleasure.